Welcome to Daily Victory with Jesus. If you're listening right now, I don't believe it's by accident. I believe God placed this moment in your path because maybe, just maybe, your soul is tired. Maybe your faith has been hanging by a thread. Maybe you're in a place right now where you're smiling on the outside, but inside, you're breaking quietly. And no one sees it. People ask you how you're doing and you say, "I'm fine." But you're not. You feel stuck. You've prayed, you've cried, you've done everything you know how to do, and it still feels like nothing's moving. You're not alone. See, life has a way of knocking us down in places we didn't expect. Sometimes it's not even the storm that breaks us. It's the silence after the storm. The moment when you're looking around for answers and heaven feels quiet. I've been there. I know what it feels like to give your all to something, your heart, your energy, your prayers, only to watch it fall apart in front of you. I know what it's like to believe for a miracle and walk away with a wound. I know how heavy it feels to have bills due and no idea where the money will come from. To look in the mirror and wonder if you're failing your family, your purpose, your God, or even yourself. You wake up with hope and go to bed with doubt. You start the day in faith and end it in fear. But let me tell you something no one told me when I was at my lowest. God is still there. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when He's silent. Even when your prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, He's still in control. See, the enemy wants to convince you that silence means absence, that delay means denial. But I need you to hear me right here, right now. Delay is not denial. Silence is not abandonment. God didn't forget about you. He's not punishing you. He's preparing you. Sometimes God will let everything around you collapse, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you stronger. Because the truth is, some breakthroughs don't come until we break. Some victories are born out of complete surrender. And sometimes the only way to hear God clearly is to lose everything that was drowning out His voice. I know you're tired. I know you've thought about giving up. I know you've whispered, "God, I don't know what to do anymore." But let me remind you of something powerful. You don't have to know what to do. You just have to know who to trust. Faith isn't knowing how it will work out. Faith is trusting God, even when it doesn't make sense. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he didn't ask Jesus for a blueprint. He stepped out on one word, "Come." That's it. He walked on a word, and maybe that's all you have right now. A word, a promise, a scripture you cling to with shaky hands. That's enough. Don't let fear tell you otherwise. Don't let delay convince you God has changed His mind, because what He spoke over your life, it still stands. Even if you're in the middle of the storm, even if the doors haven't opened yet, even if people gave up on you, even if you gave up on yourself. You see, faith isn't pretty. It's not always shouting and dancing. Sometimes faith is messy. Sometimes it's praying with tears rolling down your face and your voice cracking from exhaustion. Sometimes it's whispering Jesus' name when that's all the strength you have left. But let me tell you, that kind of faith, the kind that crawls when it can't walk, the kind that still worships in the wilderness, that kind of faith moves mountains. You see, everyone loves to talk about miracles, but no one wants to live through the part where you actually need one. We shout about victory, but we rarely speak about the valleys that shaped it. That space between the promise and the fulfillment, that's where the real battle is fought. It's in that space where your faith feels fragile, where you're surrounded by people but still feel completely unseen, where your past keeps calling and your future seems silent. That's where God begins to build something in you that no platform or paycheck could ever teach. Because before God brings you into the spotlight, He usually breaks you in secret, not to harm you, but to teach you to depend on Him and not the applause, to show you how to worship without the crowd, to strengthen your roots before He grows your branches. And maybe that's where you are right now. Not in the harvest, but in the hidden years. The years where the phone doesn't ring. The years where you wonder if the dream was even real. The years where you're faithful but no one's watching. The years of sowing, watering, crying, and waiting, but no sign of breakthrough. Those are the years that build your voice, that forge your character, that prepare you for rooms you didn't even know you'd walk into. So don't curse the silence. Don't despise the waiting, because God does His best work in the shadows. The womb is dark before birth. The soil is dark before the seed rises. The tomb was dark before resurrection. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you're not buried, you're planted. And what God is doing in you is growing down before it grows up. He's not just building your future, he's preparing you to carry it. Because what good is the blessing if you break under the weight of it? What good is elevation if your character can't hold it? That's why he's letting you face the silence. Not to punish you, but to prove you. To prove that you're still a worshiper without a stage, that you'll still serve when there's no reward, that you'll still believe when there's no sign, that you'll keep showing up with no fanfare, no spotlight, and no shortcut. Because when God sees that kind of heart, he knows he can trust you with more. And I get it. You might be saying, but I've been faithful, I've done all I can, and I still feel stuck. Let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. Progress doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes progress looks like survival. It looks like waking up and choosing not to quit again. It looks like praying when your voice shakes. It looks like forgiving when you're still bleeding. It looks like tithing when your bank account is screaming. It looks like saying, God, I trust you, when you don't even trust yourself. Don't confuse being pressed with being defeated. The crushing is not your ending, it's the process that brings the oil out of you. That pain, that crushing, it's producing something, so don't you dare give up here. There's something sacred about the moments no one claps for. The moments where you're obedient, and it feels like nothing changes. When you turn down the compromise, when you walk away from the wrong relationship, when you say no to what feels good but isn't God. And yet the doors still stay closed. You begin to wonder if obedience is even worth it. But let me say this, obedience is never wasted, even when it doesn't bring reward right away. Even when it costs you comfort, relationships, or reputation, obedience plants seeds you can't yet see. Some of the greatest moves of God in your life won't come with a warning. They won't be loud. They'll come quietly through alignment. Because what God has for you isn't based on striving. It's based on alignment. Being in the right posture, in the right position, at the right time. And the truth is, sometimes the blessing is held back because your heart isn't ready to hold it. Sometimes the very thing you're begging God for would crush you right now. So instead of answering your prayer with a gift, he answers it with a lesson. He teaches you trust. He exposes the parts of you that still want control. He uncovers the pride, the ego, the insecurity you've hidden behind your busyness. Not to shame you, but to heal you. God will always deal with the foundation before he finishes the house. See, there's a version of you that can survive storms, but that version only emerges through fire, through discomfort, through the kind of transformation that doesn't happen in public, but in private, when no one is watching, when it's just you, your tears, your journal, and God. That's where clarity is born. That's where calling is refined. That's where you stop chasing approval and start seeking presence. Because when you stop needing the validation of people, you become available for the voice of God. And maybe that's exactly what this season is about. Not punishment, not abandonment, but preparation. Because what's coming requires a version of you that doesn't just look strong, but is strong. A version of you that isn't shaken by silence, that doesn't panic and delay, that doesn't trade calling for comfort. What's coming isn't small. That's why this season feels so intense. God is not just preparing a breakthrough. He's preparing you to be the kind of person who can keep it, carry it, and steward it well. So if it feels like you're being stretched, it's because you are. If it feels like you're being refined, it's because you are. If it feels like you're being emptied, it's because he's making room. Room for better relationships, room for deeper joy, room for a faith that isn't circumstantial, but unshakable. So let the fire do its work. Let the silence build your roots. Let the waiting make you wise. Let the loss teach you what truly matters. And know this, not one tear you've cried is wasted. Not one prayer has gone unheard. Not one sacrifice is forgotten. He's seen it all. And when the time is right, he'll reward what you did when no one was looking. Sometimes the greatest answers come disguised as silence. Not because God is absent, but because he's doing work you're not supposed to see yet. You're asking for direction, but what if the delay is the direction? What if what feels like standing still is actually God slowing you down long enough to keep you from crashing into something that would have derailed your destiny? See, we think we need speed. God is looking for surrender. We think breakthrough is found in hustle, but often it's hidden in humility. It's in the moment when you say, God, I don't like this, I don't understand this, I wouldn't have chosen this, but I still trust you. That's power. That's worship. That's faith. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that holds you together when everything else falls apart. And you might not feel strong right now, but strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing to keep breathing through the weight. Sometimes it's resisting the urge to isolate when your soul wants to shut down. Sometimes it's turning off the noise, opening the word, and saying, "Speak to me, Lord. I'm listening." You may not be where you thought you'd be by now, but let me tell you, you're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where God needs you for what He's building in you. Because purpose doesn't always start with a platform. Sometimes it starts with pain. Sometimes it begins when the crowd walks away, and you're left alone to rediscover who you really are, without the titles, the noise, or the expectations. That space, that holy isolation, it's not punishment, it's invitation. God is stripping away what you thought you needed so He can show you who you really are without it. He's calling you to stand without the applause, to trust without the clarity, to worship without the outcome. Because it's in that empty place where He becomes enough. You've been through things that could have broken others, but you're still here. Not by luck, not by chance, but by grace. That grace, it's the only reason you didn't lose your mind. It's the only reason you're still standing, still believing, still fighting for peace, still hoping for better. God didn't let it take you out because there's still more for you to do. Still something for you to carry. Still someone for you to reach. Still a story inside you that isn't finished yet. And no matter what your past looks like, your future is still eligible for redemption. So don't let your current chapter convince you this is the end. You serve a God who brings dead things back to life. He doesn't recycle, He resurrects. What you lost, He can replace. What you missed, He can restore. What you messed up, He can use, not in spite of it, but through it. There is no wasted season when God is involved. Even the delays, even the detours, even the decisions you regret, He's weaving it all into a story you'll be proud to tell one day. But for now, just breathe. Let the pressure press you deeper into Him. Not harder, not faster, but deeper. There comes a moment in every believer's life where you stop asking, when will it happen for me? And start asking, who am I becoming while I wait? Because one of the greatest gifts God gives isn't just the blessing, it's the becoming. It's the unseen transformation. The shift in how you think. The maturity to hold what you used to chase. The healing that turns survival into testimony. You see, God is more concerned with your development than your deadlines. He's not rushing you into the next chapter. He's refining you for it. And while others may not see the work He's doing in you, He sees it all. The moments where you resisted going back to what was familiar, even when it was easier. The times you chose integrity when compromise would have felt more comfortable. The days you showed up in silence, with no applause, no reward, no results, just obedience. That's not failure. That's formation. Because not everything God does in you will be obvious to others. Some growth happens underground. Some faith is built in the shadows. Some victories have no spotlight, but they're real, and they matter. You're not the same person you were last year. You may not have everything you prayed for, but look at the things you've outgrown. Look at the things that no longer trigger you. Look at the peace you've learned to protect, the boundaries you've built, the wisdom you didn't have before. That's evidence. And when the enemy tries to convince you that nothing's working, remind him that spiritual growth doesn't always show up in bank accounts or job titles. Sometimes it shows up in your restraint, in the way you stay quiet when you could have clapped back, in the way you choose grace over revenge, in the way you trust instead of panic. That's growth. That's victory. And just because people don't see it doesn't mean heaven hasn't recorded it. Let others chase visibility. You chase presence. Let them measure success by applause. You measure it by obedience. Because there will come a time, and it's closer than you think, When everything you've endured, everything you've surrendered, everything you've grown through will make sense. You won't just walk into what God promised. You'll walk into it as the person He prepared you to be. And what once made you cry will become the reason someone else heals. What once confused you will become the wisdom someone else needs. What once hurt you will become a key God uses to unlock someone else's prison. You won't just have a testimony, you will be the testimony. So don't despise this stretch. Don't curse this chapter. Don't rush the revelation. You're not late, you're not stuck. You're in the process of becoming, and heaven never wastes a process. There comes a point when the quiet season ends, when the page finally turns, when the winds shift and you feel it. Not in your bank account, not in your surroundings, but in your spirit. It's subtle at first. You wake up and the heaviness isn't as loud. You pray and the words come easier. You start dreaming again, not because the pain is gone, but because hope is growing stronger than fear. That's how God brings you out, not all at once, but layer by layer. Not with fireworks, not with noise, but with quiet resurrection. He doesn't just restore what you lost, He renews how you see yourself. Because sometimes the breakthrough isn't in what changes around you, it's in what awakens within you. That's the kind of victory the enemy can't steal. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from applause, but from knowing who you are in God. See, when you've walked through fire and didn't get consumed, when you've survived the silence and still stayed faithful, when you've stood in the storm and refused to curse the wind, you come out with an authority that can't be manufactured. You walk different, you speak with weight, you love without needing to be loved back, you move without begging to be seen, because now you know. You know that God was with you in the drought, that His voice didn't disappear in the dark, that His hand held you, even when you couldn't feel it. And when He begins to open doors again, you won't be shocked, because you didn't survive for nothing. You didn't suffer for decoration. You didn't wait just to return to who you used to be. No, you've been reintroduced. And when God reintroduces you, He doesn't just send you back into the world, He sends you ahead of where you would have been without the valley. The very places you were rejected become the stages where you speak life. The very people who counted you out, watch God raise you up. The very skills you thought were forgotten become the tools He uses to elevate you. And you won't have to prove anything. You won't have to explain yourself. You won't have to announce your return. Your growth will be undeniable. Your presence will carry the oil of endurance. Your story will speak even in silence. Because when God has refined you, you don't need to fight for position. You walk in purpose. And purpose doesn't beg, it commands room. So walk through this season with your head high. You may be in process, but you're not behind. You may feel hidden, but you're not forgotten. You may be healing, but you're still chosen. The oil is still on you. The calling hasn't been revoked. The favor hasn't lifted, it's being preserved. You don't have to chase the promise. When the time is right, it will find you. When you've truly been refined by God, you stop chasing platforms and start seeking assignments. You're no longer moved by who's watching, you're moved by who needs healing. You show up, not because you crave recognition, but because someone somewhere needs the freedom you paid for in private. You speak, not to impress, but to deliver. You give, not for applause, but because you remember what it felt like to lack. There's a kind of weight you carry after the wilderness, not a burden, a mantle. A quiet authority that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. You walk into rooms differently. You don't speak first, you listen longer. You're not rushed because you know what it's like to be held back for your own good. You're no longer fueled by ambition, you're guided by discernment. And that's when things shift. Because now, you're not trying to convince God you're ready. You've become ready. And so, He begins to trust you with more. He places people in your path, not for popularity, but for purpose. He gives you influence, not to entertain, but to impact. He opens doors, not to elevate your name, but to release healing through your obedience. But let me tell you this, what's coming will require the version of you that has wrestled with God in the dark. The version of you that has laid down ego. The version of you that's not afraid to serve before being seen. The version of you that no longer needs external confirmation to stay committed. Because this next season won't be built on excitement, It'll be built on endurance. And endurance is only born in pressure. You've already been there. You've already walked through days you didn't think you'd survive. You've already proven you don't quit when things go silent. That's why you're dangerous now. Not because you're loud, not because you've arrived, but because you've learned to wait well. You've learned how to pray even when heaven felt distant. You've learned how to stay faithful when results didn't follow effort. You've learned how to serve others when your own heart was breaking. That's what gives your voice power. That's what gives your presence weight. That's what gives your yes meaning. You're not operating from emptiness anymore. You're moving from overflow, not from trauma, but from transformation. You've forgiven people who never apologized. You've let go of what tried to destroy you. You've laid down idols that no one saw, but God did, and He honored it. You've rebuilt in silence. You've been faithful in the quiet. You've chosen integrity when shortcuts were available. That's the soil God can trust. So when He says it's time, you won't have to perform. You'll carry it. You'll move with clarity. You'll walk with authority. You'll serve with compassion. You'll lead without needing to be followed. Because this isn't about proving anything. This is about pouring. You've been filled to fill others. You've been broken to bring healing. You've been hidden to emerge whole, not half recovered, not performance driven, not shallow in faith, but anchored. There comes a point in your journey when it's not just about what you accomplish, it's about what you leave behind. Not just for your name, but for the next person standing where you once stood. The person who's praying the same desperate prayers you once whispered. The one who's fighting battles you already survived. That's when purpose shifts from self to legacy. Because now you don't just want to succeed, you want your life to matter. You want your obedience to echo after you're gone. You want your scars to mean something. You want the places where you once bled to become blueprints for someone else's breakthrough. But here's the truth most people avoid. Elevation will expose what preparation didn't fix. Favor will magnify both your strength and your shadows. Visibility will draw both applause and attack. If you're not rooted in truth, the weight of what you prayed for will feel more like pressure than purpose. That's why God took His time with you. Not to delay you, but to deepen you. Not to hold you back, but to hold you steady. He wasn't trying to frustrate you. He was protecting you from premature release. Because premature exposure is not promotion, it's sabotage in disguise. And you've come too far to self-destruct now. You've been trusted with more than a moment. You've been trusted with people. People who will listen closely to your words. People who will watch how you live when no one's clapping. People who will model their faith after your response to adversity. That's why your posture matters more than your platform. That's why your discipline matters more than your following. That's why your intimacy with God must outweigh your influence in public. Because once you're sent, you can't afford to be swayed. You've got to be able to stand when the noise gets louder. You've got to know who you are when opinions flood in. You've got to protect the oil. Even when opportunity knocks dressed like blessing, you've got to remain grounded. Because when the doors open, you don't rise by being impressive, you rise by being consistent, steady, rooted, clear. You walk into rooms you used to pray for, but you walk in carrying peace, not pride. You sit at tables you once dreamed of, but you speak with conviction, not compromise. You no longer need the room to validate you, you bring value with you. And when God sees that, He doesn't just elevate you, He begins to multiply your impact. Your words start to unlock hearts. Your life begins to provoke hunger in others. Your presence becomes a catalyst for change. Not because you've arrived, but because you've endured. Not because you're flawless, but because you've stayed faithful. And here's the part no one talks about. When you truly walk in your calling, it's not about being seen, it's about being available. Available when it's inconvenient. Available when it's quiet. Available when no one's celebrating. Available because you remember what it was like to need someone and feel alone. You become what you once prayed for, not to prove a point, but to become a vessel. As the weight of your calling increases, so must your rhythm of rest. Because purpose without pause will burn you out. You were never designed to carry divine assignments on human strength alone. Even Jesus withdrew. Even He went to quiet places, Not because he was weak, but because he was wise. You can't keep pouring if you never sit still to be filled. You can't keep leading if your soul is dry. You can't keep showing up strong if you're quietly crumbling under the surface. And no one claps when you set boundaries. No one cheers when you say no to the crowd in order to say yes to your health. But that's what will preserve your longevity. The enemy doesn't always try to destroy you with evil. Sometimes he distracts you with good, busy hands, full calendars, public praise. Meanwhile, your private altar grows cold. Protect your prayer life. Guard your time in the secret place like it's sacred. Because it is. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because what you build in public will only be as pure as what you maintain in private. And as your influence grows, the pressure to perform will increase. People will start to expect from you what only God can provide. They'll want answers, healing, guidance, hope. But you are not their source. You are their pointer. You are not the miracle, you are the map. You're not the healer, you're the signpost. You are not the light, you're just the lamp he chose to shine through. If you start thinking the oil belongs to you, you'll begin to operate from ego instead of intimacy. And that's a trap disguised as success. That's why you need quiet. That's why you need people around you who love you, not just your gift. People who don't care about your title, but care about your soul. People who ask how your heart is, not just how your project is going. People who remind you of your humanity, so you don't lose yourself in your assignment. Because you can't minister to others if you've gone numb to your own pain. You can't offer clarity if your spirit is clouded. You can't call people higher if you're secretly buried under expectations you were never meant to carry. You are not a machine, you're a vessel. And vessels crack when neglected. So rest. Not just physically, but spiritually. Unplug, even from the good things, so you can stay grounded in the God things. Spend time with no agenda. Worship without needing content. Pray without preparing to preach. Just be in his presence. That's where the fire is preserved. That's where your vision is renewed. That's where your identity is secured all over again. Because no matter how far you go, how much favor you receive, or how many lives you impact, you never outgrow the need for stillness. And from that stillness comes clarity. From that stillness comes strength that doesn't fade after the applause. From that stillness comes a confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. It just moves, with authority born from alignment.